CGI animation has really come a long way since it was first conceived back when our modern notion of computers was just beginning to take off, almost to the point where it has become, frankly, unimpressive. Thanks to the strides the process has made in rendering technology, a lot of the spectacle surrounding CGI has been muted for the past decade or so. Don't get me wrong, there are some ways that CGI can continue to wow us, but for the most part, it does feel like CGI as a creative tool has reached its ceiling, especially now that it's largely the default in every application. It's telling that the last true innovation computer animation has done was imitate 2D hand-drawn animation. For this reason, computer animation and 3D rendered art feel more impressive when looked at in the past tense, when the whole enterprise was beginning to take shape, when artists were taking the restrictions given to them by the technological limitations of the time and using them to their advantage. One such historical era where we can see this in action is Japan in the late 90s to early aughts. By this point, computer animation was breaking through as a technology no longer confined to computer labs and becoming ubiquitous through its use in media and marketing. And Japanese artists were really exploring how far they can go with this new way of rendering animation. Most of this development came from the world of video games. That was where Yu Suzuki and Seiji Ishii used groundbreaking low-poly modeling procedures to craft the Virtua Fighter series, which, in turn, helped make 3D graphics the key innovation in 90s video games. Japanese 3D thrived in this sector, whether they were Hiroshi Arai creating cinematic cutscenes for Square RPG series, to Keiji Kinabuchi rendering the first 3D images of Pokemon for his popular trading card game. There's a nostalgic quality to these 3D images that came out in Japan around this time, trying to create fully realized worlds and people with such limited resources using tools that, only a decade ago, could only render simple shapes and environments. It results in images that some would call dated, even if they were necessary steps to getting to the future we take for granted now. What we see in this era of CGI is defined by the idea of how CGI rendered humans, the simulacra of human beings that are constrained by the limits of the software that created them, their eyes shimmering like pools of perfectly rendered water, their hair flowing yet noticeably artificial, and their skin smooth and perfect as if they were made of porcelain. They looked human, but not quite. They were models, mannequins, dolls. Naturally, this is why the world of anime stuck to 2D animation. Not that CGI didn't worm its way into the space eventually, but it was mostly used for effects and large-scale set pieces. The creatives in the world of anime knew their limitations and set their ambitions accordingly. But, and all CGI anime did eventually have to come around.
KYOTO ビデオ
私はドール。私は慰めてあげるのがお仕事。でももう慰めてあげる人がいない。だからお散歩をしているのよ、毎日。
Sometime in the future, or past, or whenever, there existed humans. They're gone now. Whoever they were and what happened to them, it doesn't matter. They no longer exist in this world. All that remains are robots, automata, machines, androids, whatever you may call them, wandering around the ruins of what was once a bustling red light district in the middle of some desolate metropolis. What they do now is their main function. The maintenance robots clean the streets and sewer systems. The repair robots repair the other robots and keep them maintained. The administrator robots keep everything running and make sure the robots obey the law programmed into them. But the robots that are the most active in this part of town are the dolls. Dolls are a type of robot built to look exactly like humans, or rather, a perverted ideal of a human. because they are, for lack of a better term, sex dolls, built for giving and receiving pleasure even though they have no concept of such a thing. All they know is their function, which is companionship, and that's very difficult to follow when there are no humans to give companionship to. That is the situation one such doll called Malice finds herself in. She wishes to live up to her function as do her other fellow dolls, but she cannot. So the only thing she can do is stroll the empty city streets every day looking fruitlessly for clients, from the time she activates herself to the time she goes back into standby mode, all day, every day.
今日も行くんだね、散歩に。
だってそれが私の仕事なんだもん。
客なんかどこにもいやしないのにかい？
じゃああなたは誰のためにお掃除しているの？
One day, something different happens. Former bodyguard unit Devo Leukocyte has gone haywire and is now attacking anything and anyone that crosses its path. Malice nearly gets destroyed by him, but she escapes just in time. But her escape route leads her to a part of the city she has never been to and spies what looks to be a ghost girl. The girl guides Malice to a room containing a large machine that doesn't look anything like a human has ever built. Malice speaks to the alien machine, asking if she can do anything for it. The machine answers by brutally assaulting her with tentacles that burst out from its form.
やめて。そんなことをしたら私壊れて。
Once Malice comes to, she finds out that she looks different. Her hair is no longer synthetic. Her eyes are no longer glass. Her porcelain-like plastic exterior is now soft and supple. Underneath her is no longer coolant, oil, or circuitry, but throbbing blood vessels and nerves. She is now capable of laughing, crying, and feeling the emotion of fear. Malice is now a human. And that is not good. That is not good at all. You really do find the most special anime in the most unexpected places. When I added 2001's Malice doll to my docket at the start of this year, I thought I was going to get a pretty good experiment with some historical importance attached to it, but ultimately nothing all that special considering how much it has been forgotten by the larger otaku populace. Boy was I being reductive. Malice doll is an amazing anime, even if it might not look like one on first glance. In a period where the transition to digital tools was allowing for some rough experiments, you would think that crafting a fully computer animated anime would be a losing proposition. CGI characters at that point were only used in small doses for marketing materials and video game cutscenes lasting less than a minute. Even Pixar was apprehensive of having a full human cast in their films because they hadn't quite worked out the bugs yet, and they were a big budget studio.
Simulation terminated. Simulation terminated.
The idea of having an anime OVA series in full CGI, low budget CGI at that, was just asking for a 90-minute trip into the deepest crevice of the Uncanny Valley. Malice doll, however, knows the limitations of the canvas and paints it is given to work with, and it uses that to create a disturbing, skin-crawling, violently tragic narrative that works not in spite of the CGI it's working with, but because of it. But how exactly? Well, I guess we'll start out this journey into Malice doll's circuitry by looking at the people who assembled its schematics.
こんにちは、ジョアドミ。
Malice doll is the brainchild of one Chiaki J. Konaka. If you're a millennial otaku like this possum, you might have heard of him. But if not, here's a history lesson. Born in Tokyo on April 4th, 1961, Konaka's parents were film buffs who often took him to the movie theaters along with his younger brother Kazuya, allowing the two of them to be exposed to the wonders of both local and global cinema. But the two brothers were not going to stop at being fans. They wanted to make movies. So, when Chiaki's grandfather let him borrow an old 8mm camera, that's when both brothers' independent film journeys began. But soon, their creative paths would diverge. Kazuya Konaka was able to join an independent film club at his junior high school and made lots of friends to help him out with his first movies, which tended to be sci-fi special effects films, which were popular around school cultural fest at this time, informing a lot of his future work with the Ultraman series that he is most known for. His brother Chiaki, meanwhile, had a different experience. He had trouble finding people who wanted to make movies with him when he went to junior high, and while he would eventually join some independent film circles later on in high school, where he mentored under Osamu Tezuka's son Makoto, his first projects were entirely one-man productions. Chiaki also had far more eclectic influences compared to his brother. While he did enjoy his share of Godzilla and Astro Boy, Chiaki really found inspiration in the world of horror. He liked watching films like The Exorcist and reading the works of H.P. Lovecraft. At the same time, Konaka still had an interest in science fiction, and wondered if it was possible to actually merge these two genres together to make something truly special. Skipping ahead to the turn of the millennium, Chiaki J. Konaka, his nom de plume he has used since the age of 12 wanting to emulate Western directors, is now a prolific screenwriter in the world of anime, and this is around the time where he is the most visible. He has come into greatness through his screenwriting on the psychological techno-thriller Serial Experiments Lain and the mecha noir The Big O. And this is around the time he is writing the series composition and script for Digimon Tamers, the much praised season that turned a kid's adventure with digital monsters into a Lovecraftian cyber horror. Konaka is a very busy man around this time, but he has time to write a script for one small experimental project, and it'll be a doozy. I've talked before about Gaga Communications and how they were one of the first Japanese companies formed out of the need to license out anime to American audiences back in the 80s. Their marketing materials shows we have come a long way in terms of localization.
Design specialists on the cutting edge of high-tech, high-concept, heavy metal action entertainment. Thunder Warrior.
But around the 90s, they had begun to branch off into actual feature productions. They were the money behind the famous 1991 Toku film Zeiram, but in terms of anime, despite being a licensor of them, the titles they actually produced were quite rare, preferring instead to focus on their distribution and publishing businesses. However, computer animation was really gaining some ground by the late 90s in all spheres of the global culture industry, so we can't rule out the possibility that some big wheel at Gaga thought that maybe they should be one of the first to get on this train. Pixar was already making waves with their movies, and there was already some rumbling that Square was setting up a studio to make their own big budget computer animated movie. The time felt right for someone to bankroll the first all CGI anime, and that someone was Gaga. Malice Doll was not the first full CGI anime though. That honor went to the 2000 feature-length movie and future stay-tuned anime, Alice. It's no secret why a guy like Konaka, whose work approaches the computational progress of the late 20th century with a sense of fear and awe, would be drawn to this environment. And he did have a good story in mind. Getting that story off the ground was another thing entirely though. Apparently, early in production, there was conflict with the first director attached to the project, which culminated in their departure. Gaga found a more than worthy replacement in Ketaro Motonaga. Motonaga had been an episode director since 1989, but he was just beginning his career as a project lead director with the 1997 Ray Earth OVA, taking a story about a fantasy adventure in another world and turning it into a more somber, darker affair. And for an anime like Malice Doll, he was the right man to lead such a project. Malice Doll is a great example of not judging a book by its cover. If you're a newcomer and you're giving this movie a passing glance, what you see might look a little cheap. This is a work from the writer of Serial Experiments Lain? A bunch of real dolls wandering around gray industrial corridors with animation that makes Hoodwink look like Into the Spider-Verse? And if it looks cheap, that's only because it was. Gaga were B-movie producers. They weren't going to be spending Spirits Within money on these projects of theirs, which, in retrospect, was the right call.
Listen, Aki.
I'm still mad at you.
But a thing that really makes Malice Doll look strange in the cold light of 2026 is the fact that this was a CGI picture made by people who had zero experience in the field of computer animation. This is something you can see with how scenes are blocked. Whereas computer animators strive to make their characters move like actors on a soundstage, the blocking in Malice Doll is more typical of traditional anime. Scenes are created more like they were paintings or comic panels. They're less three-dimensional. As a matter of fact, this anime isn't even completely CGI. Some effects were hand-drawn. You can especially see it near the end. The Uncanny Valley effect is unavoidable when taking these factors into account. But this is what brings me back to my original point. Malice Doll knows it is destined for the Valley, so it turns the Valley into the biggest tool in its arsenal. Both Motonaga and Konaka already had a plan in mind when given the assignment by Gaga. They were not going to treat the models like they were computer-generated actors, but as if they were puppets. Motonaga referred to his vision as a puppet theater where the puppets are supported from underneath. And Konaka also brought some of his eclectic film interests into play, drawing from the Czech stop-motion films of Jan Svakmeyer when envisioning how the story would play out. It also makes sense why these characters move the way they do. They are robots. They cannot and should not be able to move like human beings. While they do a good imitation of life, it's still an imitation. Even when Malice becomes a human, it doesn't look like she's actually a human. She's only been given the gift of flesh and blood, and that's why, even though her movements may be smoother, they still look robotic. She has never moved like a human, so why would she know how? The real secret sauce for Malice Doll, though, is designer and animator Shinobu Nishioka. Motonaga had brought them over when he came on board the project, and their presence is why Malice Doll has a lot of the sauce. Nishioka's designs work in the rudimentary CGI that this anime is using, but they work in universe as well. The designs of the dolls look ostentatious and loud because, once again, they're android prostitutes. Their costumes are both marketing material and signals to what kind of fetishes they cater to. Malice represents a young, trendy teenager. Doris represents a sophisticated geisha. Amanda represents a classy lady of the night. Misty represents a heavily racialized jungle queen dom. Heather represents a doe-eyed otaku baiting maid. And, most disturbingly, Elsa is supposed to represent an abused slave, with her sad eyes and chains around her ankles. The designs are made even better when it hits you that the only reason the dolls are given human forms is because they were designed for sex. The other robots, whether they be male or female, do not look human. Whether they're designed like heavy-duty weapons or alien creatures, they are unmistakably machinery. All robots in this universe have designs dictated by their function. The dolls are designed to walk and talk like humans because that was the most optimal design to attract customers. Meanwhile, Joe Administrator was made to enforce the law of robotics, and that's reflected in his imposing, authoritative design. But then you realize his mouth doesn't move when he speaks, because that was not a design priority. How does him looking and acting like a human better serve his duty as an administrator to other robots? The Uncanny Valley is embraced even in the audio, whether it be the ambient industrial soundtrack of the film,
Malice 見ているんでしょマリスちゃんと見て私の顔を見なさい
or if it's Yukie Yamada's performance as Malice. Befitting her role as a robot imitating a human, her voice in the beginning has the sound of a human's, but is delivered in a very clinical and remote way.
でもどうしてそんなに壊れてしまったのあなたはパイプ工事をしているのでしょ
But when she becomes a Malice of flesh and blood, she still retains the voice she had, but now it's overflowing with new, unexperienced emotions. So, when Malice speaks, it sounds like she is unsure of what to feel in the moment because she is feeling these emotions for the first time.
私はドールだよ私は私
The low-budget animation of Malice Doll really serves the world it was designed for well. And that goes the same for its unsettling narrative. At its steel heart, Malice Doll is a horror story. Not just any horror story, but a body horror story. A story that preys on the fear of contamination, deformity, and your own flesh turning against you. And it tells this story in a world where flesh no longer exists. Pretty daring concept if I do say so myself, and certainly a real killer pitch to get you in the door. What's even better is that Konaka really delivers on that premise of making a body horror for machines. There's already a deep, uncomfortable horror right when we start. We are in the middle of a post-apocalypse where humanity is completely gone and the machines made by their hands continue to do their daily task. A premise many sci-fi writers that came before have delved into, but that premise is given another angle to it by focusing on what the sex bots, the robots made specifically for the human touch, even do when there are no more humans. Malice answers that question by saying that they walk around all day looking for anybody who requires their services. Since everyone else in this part of the city is just another unfeeling machine, that daily routine is a fruitless endeavor. But it still doesn't stop dolls like Malice, who is always willing to give the simplest gift she can give: a kiss.
キスしてあげる。私にできることはそれだけ。
The beginning really lays on the unsettling, dreamlike atmosphere of a lone machine walking through the abandoned city like a ghost, checking her still sleeping companions who are all piled up in a heap somewhere, adding to the unsettling feeling. And we feel the weight of Malice's predicament when we learn that her being a machine means she's effectively immortal but still prone to breakdowns. If she neglects to repair herself regularly, that could mean a long, lonesome death she may never come back from.
私、壊れているの？
壊れていない機械者はこの世界にはいない。皆そうなのだ。永遠を生きるにはどこかを直してゆくものだ。
But once Malice discovers the being that gifts her humanity, the tone gradually begins to shift to something more disquietingly visceral. Often in fiction, writers want to portray a robot gaining humanity as a sort of enlightenment, a gift bestowed to them like the collective Prometheus they are. But speaking from my own experience as someone who has been a human, we are flawed beings to say the least. And sometimes a writer will take that into account. Sometimes a robot needs to take the good with the bad regarding humanity. In Malice, the gift of flesh is anything but a gift. It's not even a curse either. Humanity in this anime is an evil, twisted virus.
レザー、あなたの体、とっても温かいわ。それにこんなに柔らかい。私、マリスと一緒になったのね。
You can tell from the beginning when Malice is infected with humanity with what can best be described as a violent, penetrative assault that it is not a good one. Because while she is initially intrigued by this new, light and beautiful form, that turns to worry when she suddenly gains new emotions like sadness and disgust.
かしずき、ひざまずいて神の生殖を促す欲望を刹那的に慰めるのがドールの仕事。
やめて！
何を嫌がっている？ドールはそういう存在だったではないか。
And there's also the fear that her human form has made her more vulnerable. If she gets broken in this form, there is no repair bot for her to go to. This vulnerable new vessel allows Malice to experience a new feeling for the first time: fear. But if there's one thing viruses are most known for, it's spreading from one host to the next. Near the end of the first episode, Malice finds out that her kisses have the power to grant the gift of flesh to machinery. And in the next episode, she feels compelled to spread that gift once the other dolls, led by Doris, reject her. They cannot exile her for a trait if she gives them all that trait. Malice's gift, though, is an incomplete version of what she was gifted by the machine. Her gifts of humanity manifest as monstrous mutations of the other dolls. Heather's arms become skinless tendrils, Misty's eyes become bloodshot and beastly, and Elsa, the most broken of the dolls, becomes something equally as broken in flesh form.
エルサ、その体。私、生まれ変わったの。マリスのキスのおかげで、ドリスもしてもらえばいいのに。マリスのキス、今、とっても気持ちいいのよ、私。
And they spread their gift far and wide to the other machines, their gifts resulting in even more monstrous mutations, certainly not helped by the other machines not being human-shaped like they are. But the mutations to become human doesn't stop at the physical. The programming of the robots is also infected with more human desires and feelings. Feelings like lust and sadism. It's interesting how, when all the male robots are infected with humanity, their first desire is to ravish and assault the dolls as painfully as possible. This was even first hinted at in Devo Leukocytes, who we learn isn't exactly going haywire in the traditional sense, but is filled with a desire to smash and destroy Malice's lovely body. And the dolls, having only imitated the feelings of pain and pleasure, are now feeling those sensations for real.
これまで私は痛がるふりをしていただけ。でも今は本当に痛みを感じることができるのよ。
It's clear that their robotic nature was the thing protecting the dolls from being exposed to the unsavory aspect of their function. When human Malice dwells on what she did as a robot for even a minute, she is overwhelmed by memories that fill her with shame and disgust. She realizes that she was nothing more than something to be used up and tossed aside. It's a real bleak reading on the nature of humanity that is to be read like a zombie outbreak among machines, especially with the sex-negative aspects of it all. But there's also a tragic sense of wish fulfillment in these transformations. A doll can never change its look and form. It's always going to have the same clothes, the same body, and the same look for as long as they function. And with the infection of humanity, it seemed like it would give them a way to shed their steel frames and transform them from something built for consumers into something that they themselves want.
私マリスみたいになりたいってずっとそう思っていたのよ。誰にそんなこと絶対にないのに。ずっと私は私。体が変になっても私は私でしかない。
But whether they are steel or flesh, the roles the dolls are made for is largely the same. To escape that role, a doll has to transcend steel and flesh, and that's what Malice does. In an attempt to undo all the damage she has caused, Malice goes back to the machine that gifted her with humanity. The machine doesn't respond, and after forcing it open, Malice finds something in its inner core. It's herself, a human being, but a more perfect form of human being, who tells Malice that she is the ideal self that Malice always dreamed she wanted to be. Malice, the doll Malice, denies this, saying that dolls don't dream. She says she never wanted this human body, but she also didn't want to be a soulless doll with a mechanical body as well. She doesn't know what the real her even is.
そういう姿になりたいって私は夢を見た。でもそれが本当の私の姿なんて誰がわかるのよ。
Then the machine absorbs her into its body, and after a metamorphosis, the machine dissolves into light, and Malice emerges from it a brand new Fae-like being, something that is neither flesh or steel. With everyone now reverted back into their robot forms, Malice now flies through the abandoned city before going beyond its uncharted borders. She is now free. It's a powerful ending. Malice was not meant to be a being of steel or flesh, and has become something that can finally break out of the programming of a doll. Once Malice stopped trying to transmit herself into the other dolls, she is able to transcend the boundaries that she was built for and transform herself into a body that makes her comfortable and transport herself beyond the cage the other dolls have been abandoned in. You could almost say that the themes were very transfixing to some people. Or at least that's how I see it. Konaka is very much versed in the David Lynch tradition of the film is the talking. And that's just my reading of the events that transpired. And it's just one aspect of Malice that made it go from a CGI curiosity to something quite moving on top of being unsettling. 2001's Malice is an OVA worthy of your time. Motonaga and Konaka took the limited resources they had and delivered a disquieting sci-fi psychological horror about identity and one's designated place in this world. Especially Konaka. This OVA really is a great example of how much talent he had as a writer in this time. You know, before he became a massive crank. Malice is a beautiful work that merges the themes of the text with the limitations of its medium. I can't think of any other work that would thrive under such conditions. Seek this anime out by any means necessary. I urge you. This is an anime that needs to be gloriously shown to people in its ideal form, just like Malice.
Malice, ohayou! Malice, konnichiwa! Malice, gokigenyo!
Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.